chasing a feeling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Sarah Martini, along with host Becky McNattin. We're so glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Our show today is a part 2 to a show we did quite a while ago. You may all remember last year when we did a show on hypnotherapy, and we had some questions that we didn't get a chance to process through that time. So we decided to have Calvin Hedberg back again to continue our exploration of hypnotherapy as a tool to promote mental wellness. Welcome, Calvin.
Hi, welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me back.
So
We're
glad to have
excited.
you back. It's been a while, but we're happy to have you here to share more. For those of our listeners who may not have heard our last show, tell us about you.
Yeah, hi, my name's Calvin Hedberg. I am a hypnotherapist, and now actually proud to say that I am part of the Becoming Together network.
Family.
You are.
Yeah.
You're part of our group. And that's recent, joined recently, but you practice hypnotherapy. Can you remind us again, you talked about this on the last show, so some of our listeners may be remembering that, but for people who maybe didn't hear that episode, what is hypnotherapy?
Yeah, of course. So hypnotherapy, again, is using, the natural state of hypnosis, which is, again, it's a natural state. It's used really to use suggestion and kind of make communication with subconscious mind to create positive change. So it's just an excellent tool to use, creates a deeper connection between you and your mind, your subconscious and your conscious, and really is just overall a good way for people to connect and to really start steering themselves towards their goals, their motivations, and overall sometimes work through some issues that they didn't know they had or that they've always tried to, correct or get to be better. So.
Okay. This idea of potentially either habits, things we might be stuck in. You mentioned a connection between the conscious and subconscious. Those of us in the mental health world would say, oh, there's a connection between those, but helping people even understand that there is that connection and maybe building that.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on underneath the surface. I mean, what we're actively thinking about, what is consciously on our mind is only part of the equation. There's a lot of stuff happening underneath the hood, kind of the same way that there's a whole engine underneath the car, right? There's something that's happening beyond that's even kind of pushing our conscious decisions or sometimes influencing our conscious decisions. The more we're aware of what's underneath, the more we're aware of our mind, the more we can have mastery over our mind, and the more we can use it to help ourselves. Yeah.
And I think that is so important for the clients I know that have already received your services. And since you joined us, what I think is amazing is it's giving another outlet for clients to explore their therapeutic journey beyond talk therapy. And to be able to introduce them to that and hear about their experiences has been wild and amazing. So I think it's so cool that they have access to this now.
Yeah, it's an incredible modality or therapy on its own, but it's sometimes even better and even more effective as a complementary modality. It can be used with a lot of other cognitive behavioral therapies, with traditional talk therapy. It's really just a deeper dive, and it's, it can be used on its own. It can be used with others. I just think overall it's something that everyone should work on. It's something similar to meditation that people can practice on their own even, and can kind of work their way towards having much more influence over the way they think, the way they see themselves, the way they talk about themselves, self-esteem, confidence, and overall just realizing the understanding, the why, asking the why do I behave this way? Why do I do these things?
Yeah.
And realizing that you have so much more control over your own life, over your own thoughts, and the way you behave each and every day than you could ever imagine. Yeah.
Well, and of course, I would guess that you have some bias in the arena. Those of us in the mental health world have some bias that our conscious is like the tip of the iceberg. So you said there's so much more to it. This access to the subconscious, which we'll get into in the show more, that is where hypnosis lies and hypnotherapy lies, in that massive world of our subconscious. There's so much going on, and conversations within, interactions between parts of self even. So such an interesting topic here. Right now we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we talk through hypnotherapy and ways this can help promote psychological healing and well-being. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We will be back in just a moment.
Express yourself. Nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I'm Tara Martini, along with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on hypnotherapy.
Okay, everyone. I have to admit something.
Oh boy.
Prior to our last show with Calvin, I had never participated in hypnotherapy myself. I have been really intrigued by the concept, but honestly, my only experience with hypnosis was at my senior all-night party after my high school graduation. I was in this gymnasium with hundreds of other students and a hypnotist who had volunteers come up to the stage, and then the rest of us watched them do silly things. It was a funny show, and one that I'm pretty sure many of you listening perhaps have also experienced. So fast forward many, many years to being in school to become a mental health clinician. I learned a ton about the subconscious. Everybody, we take whole classes as mental health clinicians about the subconscious. I learned about tools for processing subconscious thoughts and beliefs. I heard a bit about hypnotherapy, but never looked into it more. And I really don't know why. I can't tell you why I didn't do that. And then when Calvin was here on the show last year, I got very interested in the topic. I wanted to understand more about how it worked. And truly, I wanted to know what it felt like to experience it. So I scheduled time with Calvin myself. I have sat with this person and have done hypnotherapy with him. I didn't do a full 2-hour session, which is a typical session for you, Calvin, but I did do a relaxation exercise, and I plan to tell you all about this on the show today. First, though, Tara, what are your experiences with hypnotherapy?
Not a lot of experience with it until I met Calvin, but I will say prior to being introduced in a more in-depth way by you, honestly, I'd heard about it for breaking habits, things like smoking cigarettes.
Okay.
Was a big one that I had always saw that associated with it. Well, if you're struggling with this, try hypnosis, So then I too decided like, okay, I want to learn more about it. So I scheduled a session with Calvin. And again, it was a shorter session, not 2 hours long. But what I found was fascinating because I think you go into any modality that you're unfamiliar with, and it's like, is this really going to work?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And we hear that as therapists
All
often.
the time. Yep. So I kind of went in with that. I'm going to be open, but I don't know. And loved that it was really a guided thing. And as you were guiding me deeper into the session, I'm like, oh, this is real. This is real. And what a cool experience, and just opened my eyes to like what this really could do for not only practitioners, but also for clients as well.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful time working with both of you and even a couple other people within the Becoming Together family. It was really fun to have that on-site visit, get to meet everybody, and everybody who had questions or wanted to experience it was able to. And I'm glad you brought that up. Like, is this really going to work? I think even you yourself, Tara, we were mentioning like my mind wants to go several different ways. Like my mind is scattered in several different ways, and
Yes.
and you're like, I don't know if I can focus. I don't know if this is going to work. And I think even on the previous show, I mentioned, people who have focus issues, it's not a blocker. Like we can find ways. And I remember you and I, we worked together in a ways of, I think I used my metronome, as like a way of trying to get your attention. I talked a little bit quicker, and I was kind of that guiding force, that guiding voice. A lot of times when people are unfamiliar with hypnosis, they just sometimes don't know what to do. They need somebody to walk them through step by step. And that's where a practitioner or a facilitator is there to kind of explain what to expect, what to do. Sometimes it is as easy as listening to a step-by-step and letting yourself just kind of let everything else fall away and focus on what we're discussing, focusing on the suggestions we're given.
And one of your questions you asked me pretty quickly into the session, you were like, do you have ADHD or ADD? And I said, I do. And that's why I'm like nervous about how I'm going to be able to pull this off. And you're like, quickly realizing it, and you're like, that's why I have been speaking in a faster way. This is why I have added. And so I bring that up, one, to show that for people who think, well, I do have attention issues, is that a block? Like you just stated, it isn't. You beautifully adapt to your patient and work with what their thing is. And I very much, with no medication needed, was able to focus by using the tools that you used to help guide my attention.
Yeah. And part of why I'm having Tara and I share our experiences is because this might be new to listeners out there that we now have done it. I wanted to know what this felt like. And very much I knew I was in a different state,
Yes.
but I was very participatory in the experience of hypnosis. And I was engaging, I was talking. I have a difficult time, listeners, if you have not learned this about me yet, to relax or to sit still. And very fascinating that in about 30 seconds, Calvin learned about me. Should we do a relaxation exercise? And that's what I did in my hypnotherapy session. And when I say worked, that's a hard word to utilize.
True.
But what I can say, the goal of that hypnotherapy brief session was to find a way to come up with a hand movement that would bring me back to that state of relaxation or calm and identify it in the session, and then later be able to do that thing, which would activate my brain to go back to the visualization that was occurring in my session with Calvin. And I will tell you, people, I did not necessarily think that this was going to, I'll put in air quotes, work. And it does. I have used this hand motion that Calvin and I came up with in the hypnotherapy session together. And I instantly, my brain goes to the visualization that I created in the session.
Really?
And so when I would say, does it work? Like, that was the goal of the session, and it absolutely was effective.
Wow.
So to Calvin, people might be wondering, what is the difference between hypnosis and hypnotherapy? Is there one? And can you explain that?
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that you've been keeping up with that and that it's worked so well for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
It's an incredible session. And yeah, you like I said, you surprised yourself, and it was more interactive. I was asking questions about what you were
Yes.
seeing, what you need to do. But yeah, so to get to your question about what is hypnosis versus hypnotherapy, you even mentioned before, some people's first touch in with hypnosis is a stage show or something that happens at like the end of a senior year in high school.
Yes.
And I guess when it comes down to what is hypnosis and hypnotherapy, hypnosis can be done in a casual capacity. It can be done for entertainment. It can be done in a way to get somebody into a focused attention state and then give suggestions that are kind of a little bit more goofy or funny. I mean, hypnosis can be kind of fun, to do, like have somebody for a moment think their hands are stuck together, or for a moment have them speak gibberish. That can be done for entertainment purposes. But hypnotherapy is really using this focused state of attention, the selective thinking, for therapeutic means, for affecting change.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what is your favorite thing about hypnotherapy in this modality?
Absolutely. So I think I mentioned this on the first show as well, that I love using my voice. I think voice and vocal work is super fun. I really admire voice actors. I admire people who are able to do things like guided meditation, everything else. I like to use my voice and creative language. Things like, I think you even, at Becoming Together do, what is it, poetry?
Yeah. My jam.
Yeah, poetry therapy and everything else like that, using creative language. But really, when it comes down to hypnotherapy, it's that emotional connection. You get to work one-on-one with somebody. You get to assist them, to help them, to make sure that, that at the end of the session, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much lighter. I feel so much better. It's that personal connection you have with somebody when you work with them that really, really comes down to it. That made me kind of realize that, in a past life or, old jobs, it was like, that was the moment that I enjoyed most in my day, is when you got somebody to light up and go, oh my gosh, you were so helpful, or that was amazing, or I feel so much better. I'm so relieved. All those things. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the huge benefits that I took away from our experience was I picked something. So the topic I picked, or issue, was something I'd been struggling with, which was taking notes. And that's something, like, for anyone who struggled with one aspect of our job, everybody has those moments. It's one that, like, okay, well, of these million things, yep, I'm going to try and work on like this, but you don't really know how, right? You can talk to it with a therapist and things like that. And I had done that. But then bringing that in and knowing, like, there is dedicated time, this almost the sanctuary I can go to where we're just going to talk about like the struggle with the notes, because so often I feel like it's one of a million things people are dealing with.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
But have that dedicated time. And so that is also one of the things that you can do during hypnotherapy, is addressing, challenges or obstacles that you're having in life, at
Absolutely.
work, with family. It isn't just, for one type of question or topic or issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you are team hypnotherapy. So there is some bias in this, but why would you say hypnotherapy and not another form of therapy?
Mm,
Yeah, I think when you're talking about that, and why would you choose hypnotherapy? Why would that be something you decide to do? Oftentimes, you'll find with an issue, people consciously are aware of it. They understand there's an issue. They
Mm.
see that there's an issue, right? I'm addicted to XYZ, or
mhm,
I know that, oh my gosh, every time I try to get my notes done, I just can't. Like, I can't do it. You're aware of the issue. The issue is there. Maybe you've even tried to use traditional therapy to walk through it, to talk through what are the reasons why. But sometimes when you dig deeper, sometimes when you said, like, when you take that time to actually look at it, to shut out all other distractions and look deeper into it, sometimes you discover more about why that issue exists. And sometimes you can kind of work through that subconscious part of you that is telling you just to stay with the routine, stay in the comfort, ignore that thing. That thing has always been there. Why are you trying to change that thing? So hypnotherapy can not only work to kind of change things at the subconscious level, but sometimes can give you more insight on why the issue is there. So if you've been trying things where you're trying to focus it down consciously, and you can't seem to change, you can't
Right.
seem to get out of the habit, you can't
Yeah.
seem to break the routine. Oftentimes, hypnotherapy is a great way to look under the hood. Have a deeper dive, examine it further, and sometimes create that that subconscious tailwind that you need to actually make a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we just last week were talking about the subconscious quite a bit when we were talking about self-sabotage.
Yep.
And the idea that our subconscious is always interacting
mhm,
with our conscious, but sometimes having more of an attuned focus into the subconscious can give us a meaning making and an understanding. I like your description of why,
Yes.
because our conscious might say, I understand the problem, yes, but I don't necessarily get why.
But what do we
And
do about it?
yeah,
Right.
let alone what we do about it. And tuning into the subconscious can help us understand more about why the situation exists, and then how we would address it, because we understand more about the why.
Right.
Oh, then we really get the problem that we need to address, which is of course super cool and can help us with things we might be stuck in.
Yeah,
Well, and it's
and as you mentioned,
point.
Tara, like I think you even mentioned, like, taking time out of your day or having all these other distractions fall
Mhm.
away is the other thing. Actually, focusing it down, giving
Mhm.
yourself the permission, and that's one of the suggestions I often give is, you've given yourself permission. You've set aside this time for yourself. You've set aside this time to help yourself. So stay focused, stay grounded, and just go through the work and allow it to happen easily and naturally. That's kind of one of the suggestions I give every time.
Mm.
So I want to ask, because Becky and I have been blessed to experience your work. But for listeners who either missed the first episode or need a reminder, what kind of things happen in a hypnotherapy session?
Yeah. So a hypnotherapy session doesn't just jump right into hypnosis.
Okay.
A lot of people are like,
Okay.
what's going to happen when I walk in that door?
Right.
Or,
It just begins.
Yeah, no, it doesn't just begin. It's like every other therapy where you're going to have an intake. You're going to talk through things, right? You're going to actually describe the issue that you're experiencing, how you'd like to use your time. At that point, we're going to get all of the things surrounding your issue. Oftentimes, in a 2-hour session, almost the first half of that is all just discussion, talking, getting to know each other, building that rapport, building that trust. And then, of course, there's a lot of time to ask, what about hypnosis are you worried about? What concerns do you have? What unknowns are there that I can answer for you? So that by the time you get to the second half and you actually start going in to the hypnotic state to do the work that we outlined, you feel much more comfortable. You know where we're going. We have an outline.
Yep.
You're not going to have any surprises. We're not going to be doing any of the goofy things that come with recreational hypnosis or stage
Right.
hypnosis. That's
Yeah.
not going to happen during a session. We're going to make sure we describe everything that's going to happen before it happens. And that way, when we get into that focus state where you let everything fall away, where you focus on your issue, you can be there a lot more, a lot more presently, and then actually have that change occur by the time, you're out of the hypnosis, out of the hypnotic state, and we have that breakdown, at the end where we talk, what did you experience? What did you feel? What changes and shifts did you feel? And by the time you get to that, it's a complete session.
Okay.
Well-
Are there people who can be hypnotized easier than others?
Good question.
Yeah, I think overall there are some people who just feel way more comfortable with it off the bat, but everyone can be hypnotized unless there's like unless
Okay.
there's like a language barrier or something where you can't cognitively understand what I'm saying. If you can understand what I'm saying and you can actually hear the words, you can absorb the words.
Okay.
And you can get into that state. I'd say that overall, some people might think that, when it comes to like hypnosis, is it like a weakness? And it's absolutely not a mental weakness. It's a mental strength to be able to
Okay.
focus and concentrate. It's really just developing mastery over your own mind. So being able to find ways that do get your focused attention, that do get you to like start looking more inward to focus and concentrate, that just really comes with practice. So some people, yeah, they take to it right away. They're just like naturally gifted with being able to get into that focused state. Other people might need to work at it, or might need different methods, or might need more professional help getting into that state. But I promise you, anybody who comes at it earnestly, anybody who tries, you're going to get there. It's just a matter of, sometimes a little bit of trying to see what works. But that's where we work together, and that's why we give ourselves plenty of time in a session to figure out what that is.
Okay.
Well, and I think that there's so much beauty in that regarding, it's just like talk therapy, right? Or different modalities of, well, what if I have a hard time talking about feelings or like digging deep? And it's amazing what you say is, hey, that can be a struggle that you have, and we'll adapt to it and things like that. This really is for everyone, as long as you're able to hear your voice and be able to, follow along. That shouldn't be an obstacle for people. It's not just for the creative and people who love to talk about feels.
Yeah, because I feel like you guys probably get that all the time. Like, oh, they're gonna make me talk about my feelings, or like, or I'm gonna have to get into that deep dark spot I never want to touch. And it doesn't just jump right into that. You don't just jump into a session and just be like, all right, talk about that incident. You're like, let's talk, let's figure this out, let's get comfortable with each other, and then you realize people start opening up over time.
Yeah,
it can take time. It can take time to figure out what works, to get people comfortable, to just kind of realize that they're there to help themselves. They're there for a reason. They're there because there's an issue that they want to solve.
Yeah.
And I think once they realize that it's their time, they're in control, they're, can work at their own pace. It's the same with hypnotherapy. You're going to kind of work at your own pace. We're not going to rush anything. We're working together. It's collaborative.
So speaking of that, when you are working together, is it that you need to focus just on one issue at a time, or can you treat multiple things at once?
Yeah, I think this was mentioned as well in the first show, that sometimes the original issue isn't exactly what people thought. Or, sometimes the issues evolve. I think overall you are working on things holistically. Oftentimes the core of a lot of issues that people are experiencing, like the core of what a lot of people are experiencing, is things around like self-image, self-esteem, confidence, the way they think about themselves, the way they speak about themselves. Because, mental law of repetition says that if you continue repeating yourself, I could never do that, or I'm a failure, or, if you keep repeating that, eventually you'll believe it. So maybe you can start thinking about, oh, I'm going to get better, or, I'm always getting better, or I'm still learning. Those sorts of things, being kinder to yourself, will help a multitude of issues. But yeah, oftentimes you can work in things in tandem, and sometimes you'll find that things are connected. We talked about that iceberg, right? The whole thing of there's a lot happening under the subconscious. And if you, especially in that same metaphor of a car engine, right? Sometimes a bunch of lights go on because one thing is out of whack, and it kind of has a bunch of other things, or there's branching consequences. And all of a sudden you find the issue, you help kind of unearth that, help correct the issue. And now suddenly everything's back to normal. Everything starts falling in line. Everything starts feeling better all at once.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. I think of constellation as you're talking, that sometimes understanding how pieces are connected to one another. Someone might come into a session being stuck in a certain behavior and realize that connects to self-esteem. And once they've figured that out, because they've tuned into what the subconscious is saying around self-statements, or then they know how to address it too. Well, I want to get into various life issues and how hypnotherapy might help with those. We hear often in the mental health realm about maybe specific diagnoses and or life experiences. And I want to toss a few of them at you and have you share with listeners, how might hypnotherapy respond to that? What might you use, tools or strategies? So because Tara already mentioned ADHD, let's start there. She talked about her own. Tell us how hypnotherapy might work with ADHD.
Absolutely. I will say that just as a general disclaimer, make sure that, when you are working with things that are going to be a little bit more, I guess, serious, or sometimes like neurochemical or other things like that, make sure you're definitely working with, the proper licensed medical professional in that case for your diagnoses and for any sorts of ongoing treatment.
Yeah, you're not the one providing those
Right.
diagnoses. They're
Correct.
coming in with those.
But like I mentioned before, hypnotherapy is a great complementary modality that can help a lot of times. And even if you just ask your current provider, hey, I was thinking about hypnotherapy. Do you think that would be a good thing for me to approach?
Yes.
I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, a provider's going to say, yeah, no, go for it. It's a very holistic, like I said, it's mastery over your own mind, and it's really going to help a lot. So oftentimes it'll be recommended. But when it comes to ADHD or focusing issues, one of the big things that hypnotherapy can do, as Tara experienced, is that it can get you to be a little bit more present. It can help you shut out other distractions. It can oftentimes, I think people with ADHD experience like hyper focus, where they sometimes will get into that flow state or that zone. And sometimes it's random. They'll go down rabbit holes. They'll find things that kind of catch their fascination. And before they know it, they spent 10 hours doing a single task, or they have, a couple minute by minute picking different tasks. If you got more mastery over where you can direct that focus, where you can direct that attention, if you start realizing when your attention is drifting or your focus, you get more conscious awareness around that through hypnotherapy, you can control it better. And some people find that they can then put that, hyper focus on something, they can control where it goes instead of having it just be random or spontaneous.
That's huge.
What about anxiety? Or, anxiety is a giant umbrella. So, panic attacks could go in there, phobias. So I'm just going to say anxiety, but.
Yeah, for that, things like grounding techniques, sometimes just realizing when it's happening, having the signs be more on the top of your mind, and then using things like we did with you, Becky, with anchoring, trying to have like an anchored, calm mind state that they return to. So giving them an anchor and a trigger to return to a calm mind state. Some people get really anxious about things like public speaking. Things like that. They can use an anchor for that, or they can start having visualizations within hypnotherapy of themselves speaking confidently, fluently, not being nervous in front of a crowd. And they start to believe that, they start to move away from their past kind of fact checking, or their past thing, and going, no, I can do this. I can be in front of a crowd without stuttering, or I can be in front of a crowd and speak fluently or eloquently.
So a hypnotherapy session with you might include a visualization of them doing that thing.
Absolutely.
And creating a mentalization of what that would look like. That makes so much sense to me.
Try to cut through the overthinking. Try to cut through a lot of their past experience and saying, no, you can change. You can do this. This doesn't need to, the way it happened before doesn't need to dictate how it goes every time.
That's huge. What about for depression?
Yeah, definitely. I think overall depression can be many, many different things. I think when you are looking at the reasons that some people will at least not feel like they have the energy for things is sometimes they just have that, again, that self-destructive language, that self-destructive thought pattern. Sometimes it does come down to really just the way they view themselves and the way they view their situation. They're like, well, it's hopeless. I can't change it, or I can't do anything about it. Well, is that true? Or is it really just the way your mind is talking yourself out of being able to change your circumstances? So trying to convince their subconscious mind that, no, you can change your circumstances. You can get up and run a mile every day. You can spend more time with this person. They're not shutting you or shutting you out. It's all in that point, something that their mind has kind of kept them in this cycle that they don't think they can break, or that they don't think they can change when they can. People's propensity for change and the elasticity of their mind is incredible. You just got to tap into it.
And I think a phrase you just said that I think is important is just convincing the subconscious that for whatever it is, in that it's different than you're talking to in talk therapy, like, yes, I'm feeling depressed and I'm not motivated. How cool to have this modality then to go beyond that and look at it in a deeper way with a different lens, I think is huge. It provides hope too.
Yeah. So what about chronic pain? Because I've heard about hypnotherapy and chronic pain. Although chronic pain is not a mental health diagnosis itself, it can lead to depression, anxiety, trauma. So how does hypnotherapy work with chronic pain?
Yeah. So chronic pain is definitely, again, something you're going to want to work with a physician with, just to say like, hey, I've got this chronic pain. Is it something that I can use hypnotherapy for to help alleviate?
Absolutely.
Because there are certain chronic pains that, you probably shouldn't be on that ankle, or you probably shouldn't be doing crazy sports while you have certain actual physical injury. But things like overactive nerves or things that just like aren't really going to change unless you either use drugs or anything else. You can start using that more holistic piece of hypnotherapy to oftentimes have somebody with that directed attention just ignore those pain signals. Sometimes just shift away from it. There's that moment
Okay.
that you'll have when you're in, like when you receive a fresh injury, where sometimes the adrenaline's running. Sometimes you hadn't realized it happened yet, and you just didn't feel it for those like
Right.
10 seconds. And then you look down and you go, oh, that's not good. And then you realize it, and then you start feeling the throbbing pain. You start feeling the actual pain happening. But when it happened, you weren't paying attention. You were so focused elsewhere that you just ignored it. And if you can tap into that with hypnotherapy, have somebody completely look at it and say, I'm just not going to pay attention to this. I'm going to make it smaller, duller, further away.
Okay.
And then you can
Wow.
do that. And then that does often comes with techniques like using mental visualization to say, all right, give the pain a like a characterization.
Yep.
Like, what texture does it have? What color is it? How big is it? Cool. Now make it smaller. Now make it smoother. Now make it further away. Shrink it down and put it off to the side. You don't need to pay attention to this. This is something that you can just let go of, or that you can just direct your attention elsewhere and leave this on the side.
Well, and that's such a good strategy. And it's something we use with talk therapy, is that idea of like give anxiety or depression a name, see it as that separate entity, using personification to kind of, have it appear human.
But
is a
teaching
great
our
way.
brain the visual of
Yes.
that is so cool.
And so cool. And on top of the idea of just a unique way to look at it, right? I
Yes.
guarantee if you say to someone, how are you dealing with your pain? They'll say meds or, their doctor. But what a unique perspective to look at it from the angle or lens of hypnotherapy.
Yeah. And the fun part about like giving things names, right? There's even a
Yes.
modality that we work with called parts. And I think I mentioned this in the
Yes.
previous show, but parts is something where, you can start realizing that inside of you are many different, I think we mentioned before, lenses or perspectives, or sometimes the inner critic that sometimes people are kind of putting themselves down or having this part of them.
Absolutely.
So sometimes, personifying these parts and kind of giving them a name, sometimes helping transform that name to something kinder, making that inner critic more of a friend, more of an internal voice that's cheering you on than putting you down. Same thing with that. You can kind of give these different parts of your mental more or less power, depending on how much stake you want to give it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And maybe I'm just thinking about in a hypnotherapy session, you could have parts dialoguing with one another
So
that
cool.
that perhaps then someone is becoming more aware of the subconscious community that does exist, these voices that are all contributing to wanting to protect them, as we talked about in the show of the subconscious. That's really the aim, is to keep you safe and to protect you from hurt. And so how are these parts interacting with one another, giving them not only a role and maybe an appearance, but what they're saying to one another? I would guess that for things like substance use, habits, you probably use parts.
Yeah.
Or you could frequently.
Very much so. Yeah. You could say like, there's this whole idea of secondary benefits, or, what is this part trying to do for me? And, it's all parts of the whole, right? When we're talking about parts, we're just talking about different lenses our mind kind of thinks through. We're all still part of one whole. It's not anything that some people might confuse that or have confused that before with things like dissociative identity or multiple personality. But it's more like, how do we view ourselves? How is this internal conflict solved within our mind? And so oftentimes with things like addiction, not only are you using suggestion to, start getting them more averse to their addiction, or to bring back conscious control when they're reaching for their addiction, or giving them future visualization to see themselves kicking their addiction. But you can work with what are these different parts? Like, why are we holding on to this? What is the ultimate thing behind it? One part of our mind might be like, well, this brings us comfort. We need to do this. Otherwise we're going to lose it. We need this comfort.
Yep.
And another part of our body is like, or another part of our mind is like, well, this is holding us back. This is expensive, or this is harmful to us. We need to do this. And you got to start reasoning sometimes with these parts of your mind to say, okay, we need to think about this. Is this really bringing us comfort? Is this really what we need? Is this really helping us? Or is there a way we can change? Or is there a way we can compromise?
Well, and it's almost the idea that or the concept you just said is, if you look at it from an addiction standpoint, it's quieting the parts of you, that are saying, well, I need it. It's comfort. And then increasing the volume and the part that's saying, but this isn't good for you. And this causes us this. Just a really important part of what you do.
So what about relational conflict? That's also not a diagnosis, but I would imagine that hypnotherapy could help with this too.
For sure.
Yeah. So there's a whole thing that I've always seen and heard is that a relationship can be repaired or a relationship can be healed for if one person decides to reach out. Like sometimes it does just take one person looking at it from a different way or looking at it critically
Hmm.
and thinking about, okay, what can I do to be a better partner? Or what can I do to kind of better communicate? Because sometimes I think we've all known that when it comes to relationships, communication is just so big.
Mm-hmm.
We hear the word communication all the time.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, maybe you can look internally and say, what is preventing me from communicating? Or what is preventing me from reaching out? Or what is preventing me from being honest with my partner? And that can be parts, or that can even work with another modality called regression, which we've mentioned before, which can look back at previous events and how previous events have shaped how we view ourselves, how we behave, what sorts of decisions we make, what beliefs we've concluded about ourselves.
Yeah.
So maybe you're not sharing with your partner because you're like, I don't deserve it. Like maybe you've concluded yourself that I'm not worthy or I don't deserve it. Or, this is just who I am.
Mhm.
Or you can't be trusted.
Yeah.
Things
Right.
like that. That I would guess relational conflict or relational issues, someone might become more aware of what's activated in them. That is up for exploration in how am I showing up in relationship with other people, and then how are those life experiences shaping this moment right now.
Yeah, the why.
Yeah. So can hypnotherapy ever go wrong?
Actually, there's the whole thing with, is hypnotherapy safe? And overall, what I'm happy to report is that hypnotherapy is actually incredibly safe, and is really not known to cause any lasting harm. It's the reason why your providers be so quickly to be like, yeah, go for it,
Sure.
give it a go.
It's much more skill building and tool building than potential risks.
Yeah, it's mind mastery. Everything that's happening in hypnotherapy is the power of your own mind. It's inside out. Whatever change is happening, whatever thing you're experiencing, it's your own mind. It's not somebody doing something to you. It's not somebody controlling you. The only way it can really go wrong, and this is just the natural, byproduct of any therapy. Sometimes there can be high emotion, right? Sometimes there can be strong emotions that surface.
Certainly.
Sometimes in the moment, if somebody's really focused and a painful memory comes back, they can be a little bit absorbed in that. But the biggest thing is that you're always giving suggestions that you're safe, that you're comfortable, the danger is past. You create a safe arena. You ensure them that they're safe. You ensure them that, anything that comes up, we're going to deal with. And it's just being there with your client, being there with the person you're across from and saying, like, we're going to get through this together. You're going to experience this, but this is part of change, is kind of sometimes tapping into these things. So you can get what's called an abreaction, which is basically just an unexpected reaction to a suggestion, or sometimes like a high emotional outburst. And that is really as bad as it'll get with hypnotherapy. And that's where you ensure that they're in a safe place.
Yeah.
At home on a video call or in a calm, safe office working with you. And then you just deal with it as it comes up. And if you ever need to, you can always simply end the session, bring them back up, have them come back to conscious awareness and realize that this was all just their own mind. And this was all just something that they can recover from. And you can go back and try again.
Well, and also looking at it from the lens of bringing up the big feels isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Right?
No.
Because you're doing it in a safe environment and they have you to guide you and kind of bring you back. So
yeah, and people can always exit the hypnotic state. You can't really get like stuck. Some people, that is even a misconception. Can I get stuck in hypnosis?
Sure.
You absolutely cannot. You will be able to come back up. The only time you're going to get stuck in hypnosis is if you're in such a relaxed, comfortable state that you don't want to come up. In that case, sometimes you just need to give them some time. Some to like slowly come up. But in the case that somebody feels uncomfortable or wants to come up, you can come up so quickly.
Yeah, and I would guess that for people who are doing hypnotherapy alongside other forms of therapy, like talk therapy, and they have an ongoing therapist, hypnotherapy would give some beautiful content to process whatever is discussed or realized or actualized, even visualized in a hypnotherapy session, that someone could take that to their therapist and say, I want to integrate this. Now I've learned some things about myself.
Right.
I want to integrate this. So much to think about here. We're headed to a commercial break, everyone. But when we come back, we're going to talk through questions from you all, our listeners. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
Trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone. Everybody needs help. Express yourself.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our lovely listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And hey, everybody, I am so grateful for your willingness to jump into the hypnotherapy world with
Yes.
us. I am right there with you in not quite a cynic about it, but kind of just, I don't need to know more. And so thank you for sharing your thoughts, your questions. We had several, Tara,
Mhm.
as you know. And I think there were several people who are wondering, what does hypnosis feel like?
Which is a great question.
Which is a great question. You haven't had it before. So, hey, Calvin, what would you say? What does it feel like?
Yeah, one of the biggest kind of telltale signs of hypnosis is a little bit of dissociation. There's oftentimes just kind of shutting out other things that that aren't part of the directed focus or the directed attention. So things like, your body might feel heavier, further away, a little lighter, sometimes not paying attention to the surface you're sitting on. Other times there can be some mental changes too, where you realize that, oh, wow, I didn't have as many passing thoughts, or I wasn't thinking about the things that are normally running through my mind. You're like, oh, wow, I kind of let 10 minutes pass and didn't really think about anything other than what was being discussed in the moment, or kind of what was presently in front in the room. So
Yeah.
just kind of that general dissociation, a little bit of body sensation, and then oftentimes just a different way of thinking and a different way of experiencing time. So time dilation is quite common as well.
Yeah, I would say that was exactly what happened for me.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you said we were done, and I thought it had been 35 seconds.
Mhm.
I totally
Time is
lost a sense
different.
of time and of deeply relaxing.
Mhm.
So to me, it was a kind of picture for everybody meditative. That's kind of what it felt like to me. So I love that you say some slight dissociation. You're
Yeah,
not aware of things in the same
relaxation
way.
is one of the easiest suggestions to follow because it's nice, it's pleasant. It
Mhm.
just kind of is. It's a very natural thing to do, especially when you're in like a comfortable place. So yeah.
How long do people participate in hypnotherapy?
Yeah.
Several folks wonder this.
Yes.
Yeah, oftentimes if there's one pointed issue that you want to try to focus down, people might touch hypnotherapy once, have their issue corrected, and
Wow.
move on.
Just
but
one session, even.
yeah,
Okay.
I've had people who have done hypnotherapy, some clients who have quit smoking for, a couple of my clients came back, they'd be like, yeah, I was able to quit for 10 years after one session.
What?
And then they had one time where they picked up another cigarette. They're like, okay, I need to get ahead of this. And they came to me and we re-upped it. So sometimes it is like a one and done. But if you do start taking hypnotherapy, especially like self-hypnosis as like a more of a way to kind of get that mind mastery, you can be practicing hypnotherapy your whole life. It really is something that just depends on how much you want to engage with it and how much you want to use it. In terms of like, I think we even mentioned this on the first show was like 1 to 4 sessions is generally the most common for an individual issue. And if stuff branches out after that, we can continue doing more sessions to kind of help focus more on new issues that pop up or new issues that you're like, oh, well, we were able to fix that first one. What about this one? And then we move on from there.
Wow, what a powerful modality for people when you say just gave the smoking example. That's huge and can change people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say it makes sense that if in a hypnotherapy session, someone understands now a different issue in a deeper way, they want to schedule some sessions around that. I want to toss out there, people could schedule with you, Calvin.
Absolutely.
They can reach out via Becoming Together's website. They can see your bio on the website. But people can email you from there. They can also contact our office. If you're thinking about trying it, I definitely encourage people to try it.
Yes.
Tara's nodding her head too. Be willing to try it and see if this modality could work for you.
Yeah, and we just had some beginner classes, and we're going to be having more classes hopefully pop up in the future.
Yes, so look for those, everybody, too. Thank you for listening this morning. We're at the end of our show already. Join us next week as we process more mental health focused topics. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
We get back up and try again. Some do.